Thanks, ladies.
So I have a list of questions I'm supposed to ask. I'm going to set that down for a second. You told me just a moment ago you were at dinner and things got a little emotional.
I said we had an emotional moment at dinner. It was, it feels like the end of this incredible journey that we've been on together, and a journey that's like a trust fall for both of us, especially for you, much more for you. And it feels we've had an incredible experience. The whole team has had an incredible experience, and we were just talking about that.
And I think that when there's such truth and it's shared and it's taken in with all the complexity of what that means, it's emotional, and I think that especially having been in this crazy business for basically 57 years. I just turned 58. And yeah, right? You're still alive. When you are in that type of environment and you can trust and you can be vulnerable and you can keep your heart open and tell the truth, but also have it really show all the different sides of what that means. It was touching and emotional, and I'm so thankful.
Do you feel as if there's been a bit of a weight lifted in sharing your story?
You know what? I think there's been a weight lifted, or there's a sense of catharsis in terms of a broadening understanding, but not coming from me. I've grappled with the full understanding of all of it for decades. It's sort of been my life's big work, is understanding and fighting to stay healthy and have a good life and have good people around me and stay passionate and creative and stay loving what I do. So for me, the weight that's been lifted is seeing it all and hoping that people are able to take away from it their own experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm a conduit to it, and I think that was, it could have gone many different ways, and not all good. And this was beautifully done, I think.
I think without a doubt, you're confident, right? I would venture to guess here, I don't dabble in speculation often, but I would venture to guess that there's not a person in this audience tonight that wasn't moved, that didn't in some way relate to part of your story, and isn't truly thankful for you sharing.
And we had a great conversation, and she handed me a huge hard drive at this first meeting. I was very surprised.
I carried it with me wherever I go with her, just in case.
Yeah, it was intimidating. She said, this is my archive. It's stuff my mom collected over decades. It was the only copy, which was a bit alarming at the time. I kind of nervously took it home, on the subway, hoping it wouldn't get too bumpy. And I remember I plugged it in my office, and I started opening random files. It was over 1,000 movie clips and photos, and I started opening random files, and was struck first of all by just the range of what I was seeing. It was Brooke doing circus routines, it was Brooke doing Bob Hope shows, it was Brooke at the Reagan White House giving talks. I mean, it was crazy, but the thing that really hit me and kind of gave me a chill down my spine was I opened a clip of Brooke at age 12 on a talk show during the press tour for Pretty Baby, and I saw little 12-year-old Brooke being first praised for being beautiful and sensual and so mature, but then also being criticized for being perhaps too sexual, and is this exhibitionism? Are you participating in child pornography? And I had this odd moment of recognition, because I think that's a dynamic that still exists for anyone who's growing up as a girl, where on the one hand it's good if you're beautiful and pretty and even sexy, but on the other hand, if you cross some kind of invisible line, if you're too sexual or go too far, even though that's what everyone's telling you to do, then that's bad, and that can lead to criticism and punishment. And I just had this feeling of recognition, and that made me think, wow, like what if there could be something in Brooke Shields' story that is surprisingly relatable, and especially looking at it from the perspective of 2023, how could Brooke's personal story be this vessel for much bigger conversations?
And pulling at the threads of who is drawing those lines, right? Who's making the rules in Hollywood. It was really fascinating. And you touched so many different genres and themes throughout this film. How did you find yourself, Brooke, in a place where you were able to share such sensitive stories, particularly with Allie and George, right? How did you get there?
First, I just want to say too, it's not just who's drawing the lines, but who's accepting them.
Yeah.
And what is permissible and what do we just assume is okay, and or do we know something's not okay? I mean, you know, I had a very interesting, fraught relationships with all of it. But I think that I had been asked to do a documentary more than once, many times, and tonally it just never felt right. And Allie is one of my actual, best friend actually, and I trust her. I trust George. He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever known. We're very close. All of us are close friends. And when she approached me, my first reaction was, "Really, is this what you want to do?" I said, because it has to be about something more than just me. And I know you just sat there 2 hours of just me, but I understand the irony. But there was, I thought it has to be about something that is more comprehensive and more of a conversation starter. And I don't know if I was that articulate about it until we really had a conversation, but I'm not one to not trust, because I don't want to miss out on an opportunity of true vulnerability and honesty. And sometimes it hurts, and sometimes you're screwed by people and by the world, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to still access that vulnerability. And because it feels then as if it's on my terms to the best of my ability. You know, I haven't given up, I haven't given in, I just stay as true as I possibly can. And that's something that somehow innately I've fought for. So then to have these conversations with Allie, to talk to Lana and really find out what she wanted, what her vision was, and how to take my story and make it, and reveal its relatability. That just, once I'm in, I wasn't gonna be guarded. You can't do something like this and be guarded, because you're doing it half-assed. Like and that's never been my MO, you know, even if it hurts. But this didn't hurt, it was hard. Much of it was hard. It was hard to share it with my daughters. Their reaction was unexpected and different between one daughter and the other. But it is true catharsis when you have a larger understanding of even a life you've lived.
It was one of the last things we filmed. We were filming a kind of day in the life of, Brooke now, basically. And we thought, this could potentially be visual B-roll, was what I thought. Of course, a part of me secretly hoped this would be an amazing family conversation, but you never know what's going to happen in a situation like that. So I remember they were, making dinner, and it was just me and a cinematographer, a very small crew, and I just said to Brooke's daughters, have you guys seen any of your mom's early films? And it was like lighting a spark to a fire, and it just took off, and I kind of stepped back with the cinematographer, and it was one of those moments. I told Brooke before that a lot of the time as a documentary director, I often feel uncomfortable with the camera. I feel like I shouldn't be here, this is very awkward, I'm ruining everyone's evening, no one wants me here. But then there's these rare, precious moments where you actually feel like, for whatever reason, the fact of being here recording this now is like putting a picture frame around it and gives it a little bit of extra meaning so that people who you're filming with might say things that they hadn't had the chance to otherwise because you're there filming. And this felt like one of those moments where this whole conversation just took off and everyone had these incredible thoughts about it. And I also, like you, loved watching Brooke as a parent, in that she would listen to her kids and really hear them. And you can even see Brooke's openness. I think she's had this, as we see in the film, this lifelong dedication to learning and being challenged and growing. And we even see that in that dinner scene. At the same time, she holds on to her own truth, and that family, they might not all agree, but they can disagree in this loving, safe way. And I was so struck by that dynamic. And I think it is ultimately kind of Brooke's greatest accomplishment in a way, is to create a home that has that space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In fact, I said earlier today, I was like, she has so much to be proud of. And it really took it home when you see your beautiful, healthy, articulate, smart, ambitious girls, right? Yeah, clap for the girls, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I think that I have tried to always be present but get out of their way. I think growing up and not even understanding that I had an opinion and just wanting to be approved of and wanting to be good and liked and all of that didn't always give way to my understanding of, like I speak about, my own hypotheses. And I remember sort of vowing to myself when I had my 2 baby girls, I want to be able to listen to them. I want to learn from them. I will guide them. And I'm very tough on many levels, but to see them, one question, and they all of a sudden, they were teaching me, and they felt strong enough to disagree with me, to even criticize me, and feel okay. They weren't going to be punished, they were just going to be heard. Like it was so, I don't know what was more shocking, that or them doing the dishes, because I was like, okay, you're doing the dishes.
That was the only faithful
They do them, but begrudgingly, and all of a sudden they were like, look, I've got my gloves on. And I was like, okay, tone it down. I know the truth.
You should have cameras over for dinner every night.
Courage is best behavior.
They're teenagers, they're 17 and 20, and they're very opinionated, and the world exists for them and around them, and and then to have them have a certain level of empathy, but a certain need to express the way their world looks to them right now, which was just very foreign to me, I didn't even know that I missed it.
Right. Yeah, gosh, that's so fascinating. And, I feel like there was a lot of family dynamics discussed, of course, and I don't feel like that I watched it, right? You see the family dynamics. Knowing that you were going to talk about your relationship with your mother in that way and really explore it, is that for you kind of the first time you dove really deep in some of that, or were you sharing exploration you had already been doing over the years?
Well, the second book that I wrote was all about my mother, and it really was born of this moment that happened after my mother passed away, and I wrote an obituary and for her in the New York Times, that was what you did, and the New York Times called me and asked to have an interview, and I said, no, I'm not doing any interviews, just I paid my $1,500 or whatever it was for the obituary. And they said, well, we want to give her a more prominent position. And being vulnerable and thinking maybe someone would try to be kind a little bit to my mom with her complexity and all of it. I said, no, I really am not going to give an interview, but they said, well, can we just talk to you for a minute about a couple questions? And so I said, okay, and I answered 2 questions about a sibling she had and about a place she lived. And what ended up happening was on the cover of the obituary section on Sunday, was not my obituary, it was not what I wrote. They never printed what I wrote. And they just wrote a scathing review of a woman's life that they never fully understood. And I remember thinking, because I had such respect, you know, for the medium and for the New York Times, and you know, and it was just, oh, this is the, you know, adult paper, and you know, it was just one of those things. And so it hurt me so much, but it also made me realize that in order for my story, according to me, not what you think of it, or other people's opinion or impression, but according to me, I would need to tell it. So I did write a book about her, and it was neither a love letter nor a mommy dearest book.
So with the film, I want to tell Brooke's personal story, but also this much bigger cultural story. And I think that was the only way I could see to paint Terry in this complicated, compassionate way that I thought she deserved, where there was pain and challenges, but there was deep, deep love there. But ultimately, you know, this is someone who is, you know, trying to operate within rules that have been made by other people. She doesn't have a lot of power here. She's just trying to make a living for herself and her extraordinary daughter. So that was the line that I wanted the film to kind of explore.
Yeah.
I also was sort of struck when I finally ended up seeing the film that, you know, I had not revisited. The reason why I digitized everything is because it was all disintegrating, and I thought maybe my kids will want this stuff one day, and I hadn't looked at most of it, and it took about 6 years to sort of digitize all of it, and I thought at least I'll just have it, you know, for them. And what I was shocked by when I watched it was the fact that nobody had a problem with the line of questioning to a kid.
I
didn't even think I had it. I didn't register it. I was just trying to, you know, navigate it. But to look at it now and all the vitriol that was directed towards Louis Malle and the fact that my mother and the pornography and all of this stuff, and yeah, you don't know that that's another conversation. And no matter what it is, you know, because it didn't matter to people that I wasn't uncomfortable with much of it because I was a kid, but I didn't secretly have some terrible feeling in my stomach. But where I did have the terrible feeling was every time I sat in that hot seat and I thought, here it goes. Here's another one. A person I'm supposed to respect, a known entity in broadcast journalism, and I thought, oh God, here we go again. And then to look at it now as a mom, and why was that okay? And why didn't anybody have a problem with that?
It wasn't even just the questions, right? It was the statements.
They weren't really asking her questions. It was just very clear that the question was the statement, and they weren't interested in Brooke's answer. I mean, that was a striking through line from those early interviews to the first book Brooke tried to write, you know, after college on my own. She wrote this honest account of her loneliness and isolation and the feelings of going to college, and that was deemed too honest, too outside the lines, too not the perfect picture, that was taken away from her. And I think that was a through line through all of this, and that's part of why I wanted to frame Bookend Part 2 with 2 books. You know, the book Brooke tried to write after college that was taken away and turned into a celebration of leg warmers and healthy eating and everything else.
And a discussion about virginity.
Yes, a discussion about virginity. And then
it was the only like really truthful part about it. And you know, of course they were going to keep that part in, but that, you know, there was so much that I was going through as a famous person, but also just as a freshman, never having been away from the nest, you know, and what that entails and the beautiful journey that can be. If, you know, I was lucky enough to go to college, you know, already that was something, but.
And smart enough.
And you can see how, we've talked about how Brooke's voice changes in the interviews after college. She's like sitting there with this confidence, you know, she's speaking differently, and then it builds to the postpartum book, which was so brave, which was coloring outside of all the lines, saying something totally stigmatized, and I think extra risky for Brooke, given her public relationship with her mom, and people saying, oh, she's saying she's a bad mom, just like her mom was a bad mom. You know, it was just so courageous, and I thought illuminated this extraordinary journey Brooke had been on in terms of gaining agency, finding her identity, finding a voice, having an opinion, and realizing she could say that and be heard.
Yeah, and talking about things that some journalists said to you, could you imagine today a big show allowing a celebrity to just come on and just badmouth somebody the way that that happened with Tom Cruise? Yeah? Do you want the mic for a second? That, to me, to allow the time and space for an attack like that was astonishing. How you responded was amazing.
The New York Times came to my aid, is what I was thinking,
That
yeah.
time, they didn't
They're all good after all. They had to publish my op-ed piece.
They owed you one.
I'm not quite sure where the question is.
I don't know if that might have been a statement at you, but it was a lot to be put on someone's plate. I feel like what I learned in
I was
watching.
also someone that was being asked my measurements
Yeah.
when I was 15, and to stand up like I'm somehow on some display, and that was okay. It's like, and maybe, the acceptance of it just led the way to other people. It's interesting because I was able to have a conversation with Tom much later, and he even said, I don't know why I did that to you. And it basically was, I was like the Mikey Elite kid, you could say whatever to Brooke because she's sweet, she'll be fine. And so I learned something about myself as well, that is also up to me to not be okay with being spoken to a certain way. But it took me a long time to find agency in that way, and at different times for different reasons. Yeah. And that was something else that I think was relatable in the doc, is that we have to all do it in our own way and process all of it on our own terms. And it looks different for every person.
Yeah, it does. And finding agency, I hear that a lot. I hear it from you, I hear it from you, I hear it as we discuss this documentary. It's extremely important to you, and I feel like you want not just young women, but everybody who watches this to think about what it means to find their own agency, right? Find it in their own way, as you were saying. And I think that you point out so beautifully in this documentary that you can find it at any time in your life, right? You don't have to find it young. You can find it later. You're gonna be okay.
And you can find bits of it at different times, and it's your own personal language to you. It's hearing it, and listening to it. That's where it gets scary and tricky. And I've been lucky enough to have been chosen people to surround myself with who want to hear my real voice, and I seek them out, and I think that's one of the ways I responded to Lana. You have to fight for that too, and you have to listen to your heart and your instincts, and that's not easy.
Yeah. It's stuff like the stories that we heard in this documentary. These are why films like this are so important, right? Because people leave a film like this and they're changed. They're different because they've heard your story. And if they can relate on any one of the topics that you explored, you've changed their life. You have.
It's all of our story, and I think that was really something that was so important and so imperative to us and to me, because that's the point of community and creating, being a part of a bigger whole, and that's just we need to keep doing that in whatever way we can, because we're not meant to be alone
No.
in any of it, really,
No.
any of it, the good, the bad, all of it, but, it's really important, and Lana was so open to that and saw it on her own. I mean, not because of me, but that's, I hope people feel, it's not about me revealing, it's about people thinking, okay, there's a context. I'm not the only person to have ever felt this.
Well, and there was so many topics explored that people have sometimes felt shame about, and you explored them so honestly. I feel like you
Well, yeah, it's Brooke's personal story, but then it is this bigger story about Brooke Shields' the symbol, which was something I learned early on that Brooke personally grappled with. Who is Brooke Shields, the symbol, the commodity, the object, and how do I relate to that? But Brooke Shields' the symbol was kind of holding a mirror up to America's ideas about girls and women and how that shifted over time. And that was something that I thought was really fascinating. How could she go from being this highly sexualized child to a symbol of virginity and have to grapple with all of the psychological consequences of that? But that's something everyone was and still is grappling with. This stuff is all so present. When I looked at a lot of the material in this film, I wasn't thinking, things were horrible then. I was more thinking, nothing's changed at all.
Yeah.
Very little has changed. So what can we learn from this? Looking at it now, we're all looking at ourselves in the mirror every day, looking at other people, judging people based on the archetypes we're boxing them into. And so I hope that the film gives space for all of us to consider how we're looking at each other, how we're trained to look at ourselves, and these thorny questions that don't have easy answers. What is an authentic expression of sexuality versus sexualization? There are a lot of tough questions here. How does this relate to social media and how we all present ourselves in social media now? How we're still all so impacted by the very powerful images around us that are created by ad makers and by movies. How is that seeping into our identities and senses of self? So it's the kind of film that was such a privilege for me to work on, because it was getting to spend a long time peeling back layers and diving into these questions that don't have easy answers.
Yeah, or sometimes are hard to answer at all, right? And we know that things haven't changed a ton in Hollywood or throughout the country in general, as you pointed out. And one thing I keep thinking about too is you talked about this first on-screen kiss. Like, we know young actors are still experiencing that. But you said, when your co-star said, it's pretend, right? It's not real. What did you think about that when he said that?
He just gave me back what I thought was a lost moment, and he gave it back to me, and basically was saying, "You're gonna have your first kiss," and he should have said, "It may not be what you think it's gonna be." However, it wasn't his job. But he took a moment that he saw it in this young person that I didn't want to miss out. You miss out, you think about what your first kiss is going to be. And so it was, I think I digested it so much more later when I was able to look back at it. But in that moment, I thought, oh, thank goodness, I didn't give this away, and it was beautiful. I didn't know it was beautiful in the same way, I just felt relieved.
That's good. That's a good story.